I'm Vice President of Business Development for Northrop Grumman Innovative Systems Sector, and my portfolio is specifically human spaceflight, and it's just civil space, and more specifically human spaceflight, both in low Earth orbit, such as the ISS, and then beyond low Earth orbit, like the Gateway. So tonight, I'm going to go through three main points. Number one, I want to discuss the innovation systems sector, because it's the newest sector at Northrop Grumman. It's a whopping 3 months old, and I think there'll be some interest on new capability that's been added to Northrop. Number two, in human spaceflight, our flagship product, the Cygnus vehicle, just completed another successful mission, and that's the basis for our vision beyond low Earth orbit. So I'm going to kind of bring you up to speed on our Cygnus product, and then we'll talk about the studies that we've done, some under the Next Step program, some under our own funding, for what could our vision, Northrop Grumman's vision of the Gateway be, and what activities beyond low Earth orbit make sense from our perspective. So let's start with the first point. So I'm Heritage Orbital. It was originally Orbital Sciences, then Orbital ATK, and now Northrop Grumman. Northrop Grumman purchased the entire Orbital ATK company and moved it into a new sector that's called Innovation Systems Sector. So again, we're the newest out there. Before we showed up, this is a good overview of what was Northrop Grumman. In human spaceflight, it had a very minimal footprint, so we're bringing a lot to human spaceflight, but very nice revenues, backlog, and scale, 85,000 employees. And I think we can all agree that some of the bigger jobs, like beyond low Earth orbit, really require a size of business, a scale to be successful. So after the acquisition, here's the current state of Northrop Grumman. There's four main sectors: aerospace, innovation systems, mission systems, and technology services. And this just gives you a feel for, again, the scale, the diversity. We're spending a lot of time over the last 3 months looking in depth in all the different business areas, looking for synergy between the business areas. We're, of course, finding lots of areas of synergy, and that goes cross, dual use capability, crossing between DoD and civil, and also synergies within civil and within DoD. But the innovation systems, which I'm going to delve a little bit deeper because that's all new, really brings quite a bit of new capability. So this pretty much mirrors what the Orbital ATK company was before the acquisition. So I'm in the Space Systems Group, and the way to think of Space Systems Group is anything that starts in space, whether it's a satellite, a human spaceflight vehicle, anything like that, components supporting satellites, is in the Space Systems Group. Two other areas involving launch, missile defense, and then defense systems is primarily smart fuses, smart weapons, ammunition, etc. Our group here at the show is on the civil side, and we do have, of course, a booth here, and so if you all have any interest in any of our civil products, please stop by and we can explain them to you. But for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus just on the human spaceflight side, which is, again, my portfolio, and something I think of really a lot of interest to this audience. It also dovetails very nicely with the presentation we just heard on the use of ISS for exploration technology, and what's the future of ISS, and how does ISS tie to Gateway. So, you know, we're in the middle of all that and supporting Kirk Shireman, for example, directly with our Cygnus product. So very pleased to kind of go through this. So within the Space Systems Group, which again is the newest part of Northrop that's really relevant to this audience and to human spaceflight, we have these sub-areas. And 2018 has really been a good year for us. Basically, in each of these sub-elements, we've had many mission successes. And you know, that's so important in this business. Mission success is everything. On the commercial satellite side, we're involved with both geostationary satellites, combirds, and also LEOS communication satellites. The LEOS communication satellites are primarily supporting Iridium Next. The Iridium satellite bus is built in Europe, but then it goes to the United States. And we do final integration in our Gilbert facility, Gilbert, Arizona facility. And then that goes out to the launch site. And there's been 2 successful flights of multiple Iridium canisters or multiple Iridium satellites this year. And we put 3 geostationary satellites up that we had built, and they're now operating on orbit. So again, 2018, good year. On the scientific satellite side, it's been a long-standing business area. And in each one of these things, we're looking for crossover into human spaceflight. For example, on the scientific spacecraft side, as we get a gateway up there, there's really going to be new science that's going to go on. Some of that science we've pioneered together with NASA with scientific measurements that are made in deep space. And so this sub-area is supporting primarily NASA with satellite buses that then they can add specialized sensors onto and use in space. Human spaceflight systems we're going to come back to, and that's Cygnus. It's a flagship product line for us. We've done 9 operational missions plus some test missions. We're very proud of the reliability of it, and it's really been a good product for us. And maybe one more thing to mention on this page is advanced space systems, which I also handle, and that is among other things, there's several things in there, but among other things, it's our MEV product, which stands for Mission Extension Vehicle. That's our first step into satellite servicing, and that vehicle was substantially constructed this year. It'll launch early next year. The MEV is, you know, again, the first use of satellite servicing. It's a more simple approach to satellite servicing. I'll just mention one thing about that, and then we'll go back to human spaceflight. So the MEV vehicle rendezvous with the host spacecraft and attaches itself onto the back end of the host spacecraft. It then takes over the attitude control and station keeping using, you know, essentially we call it the jetpack. So it's using its thrusters, its reaction wheels to control the host spacecraft. That's a much simpler process than refueling, which is very invasive and involves robotic technology that I'd have to say is sort of on the edge of things. So back to Cygnus, a couple more things on the capability side, and then we're going to think of it as a mission. Because again, our vision for beyond low Earth orbit starts with Cygnus, starts with ISS. So capability-wise, it's around 3,500 kilograms of pressurized cargo. By pressurized cargo, I mean cargo that wants to be inside a pressure vessel on its transportation to the International Space Station. It has other special interfaces, and as you'll see, we're increasing those number of interfaces. But for example, mid-deck lockers, that's the primary way of getting scientific experiments up to orbit. And then with the International Space Station being so involved with biology, It's about 80% biological experiments. Things like freezers and refrigerators are super important, and there's other specialized interfaces that really support the astronauts in their biological experiments. In the next year, we'll be doing rodent transportation, because again, with biology and the type of biology that they're doing, rodent experiments are really one of the most important ways to achieve the scientific objectives that they're looking for. We've done some other specialized experiments, some that are deemed too dangerous to do inside the International Space Station, but still something that you want zero gravity for. So we've got a series of ECLIS tests with NASA Glenn, which the most visible was something called Sapphire, where we set a small fire in space and watched it burn. In follow-on experiments, then we're going to move to the putting it out and the cleaning of the air, all part of advanced ECLIS. So it's kind of an interesting experiment and something that is really a little bit too dangerous to do inside the space station, at least under current safety rules, et cetera. So with that as the overall capability of Cygnus, I kind of want you to, through pictures, take a mission with me. We'll specifically focus on the NG9 mission, which launched on May 21st of this year. And I think you'll be able to see, when you see the capabilities, and some of you, of course, are already familiar with them, but as you see the capabilities, you can extrapolate those capabilities as something that's needed in cislunar space as well. So after the launch, we do a phasing to the International Space Station. It's, you know, kind of 2 to 3 days. Sounds like the 2 to 3 days it takes 3 to 4 days to cislunar space, so very similar. The other nice thing about going to an occupied location like the International Space Station is you get a lot of beauty shots as the Cygnus comes closer. That's always nice. As someone who's worked with a lot of unmanned programs, after you launch them, you never put eyes on them again, so it's nice to get the visual indication of what it looks like. So the Cygnus here is just underneath the space station. It's flying autonomously. It's been designed to meet all of the human spaceflight requirements that NASA imposes for safety. Those requirements actually at the ISS are fully in place as you get close to the space station. So when we're farther away, we can operate with less coordination with NASA. But we go into joint operations for the final phase, and the Cygnus basically targets its own burns and climbs the so-called R-bar, or the radius vector, right underneath the space station, and gets within 10 meters of the space station. And you know, this technology is used by a lot of vehicles now, you know, LiDARs, to very accurately measure the distance to the station. We have various cameras. We use differential GPS, subtracting out errors that are measured at the station itself. And all these things make the thing so accurate. In fact, the last few missions, I've just been amazed, because you can see the robotic arm that's sitting waiting for the Cygnus. It's pre-positioned by the crew, and the crew will do the final grapple of the Cygnus. And they pre-position it where the Cygnus is supposed to go to, and then they go hands off until they get the go from the ground. And I swear the Cygnus almost flies into the lee of the capture area of the robotic arm. So it's extremely accurate system. So here you can see it's gotten into its berthing box, and the astronauts are going after it. They grab it, and there it's grabbed from the back end, and it's inserted into the bottom part of the station, one of the two berthing ports that we're compatible with right now. And this is just to give you a sense of what it looks like when you open the hatch from the inside. We usually try and have a few sort of presents for the crew. We name each one of these Cygnuses after someone who's meant a lot to the company from a spaceflight perspective. The person in the picture on the left there, J.R. Thompson, very well known in the early days of space. He worked on the RL-10 like at day one. He was the program manager for the SSME during the early days of Space Shuttle. He was a deputy administrator for NASA, and he had a very long career as president and COO of Orbital ATK, the predecessor to current Northrop Grumman. You can also, in the bottom right, see basically bags of cargo all packed very carefully, and at the bottom are mid-deck lockers where these scientific experiments are located. Looks pretty packed in there, and if you take out all that cargo there, and this cargo module is sitting on the ground, you could walk inside. It's a 3-meter cargo diameter, and most of the Russian segment modules are 3-meter in diameter. So diameter-wise, it's really very standard and could easily have habitat functionality or other functionality as well. And we can build it in different lengths if we need more volume. So the rest of the mission is to complete the removal of the cargo and then put trash back inside, or the official name, disposal cargo. And that's an important function for particularly the International Space Station. With continuous manning where they are today and stuff, the crew generates a good bit of trash. And so taking what they don't want away is very important. And the upper right picture there shows what it looks like just when it's fully loaded with trash, just before you close the door. So we kind of fill it up to the gills, and each mission we figure out a way to put just a little bit more. So I think in this particular mission we took more away than we did, than we brought up. So what's the future for Cygnus? Well, the first future, because we're all about sort of incremental change, so the first future is improving the accommodations that exist today and working very hard on LEO activities. Some of the stuff that, again, the previous panel talked about that they wanted to see happen in low Earth orbit happen with the International Space Station to support future demonstration of exploration technology and support future things, we're designing in right now. And so first major bullet there is better interfaces, more interfaces, better telemetry downlink, enhanced interfaces, longer durations. We're doing more and more after the cargo mission is over with secondary missions, which can be anything from launching CubeSats, which we do for nanoracks, to other types of experimentation. The other thing that we've already demonstrated is the middle one, which is using the Cygnus as a direct extension of the ISS for science experiments while it's attached. And one of the key points there is being able to tie Ethernet from inside the Cygnus to the payload Ethernet on the International Space Station, because every experiment's a little bit different, but really a lot of the experiments need data connectivity, and so we've got that right now. Then the final piece is the Cygnus free flyer capability, which we'll do in the next year, and that is depart and do longer duration, maybe as long as a year, of undisturbed microgravity. We can point at the ground, we could be TAS, we could even return to the International Space Station in a untended manufacturing scenario where you want to bring back the manufactured goods. So that is a typical LEO station. Now I want to move on to our vision for beyond low Earth orbit. This slide is really just showing more pictures of what the inside looks like. We've covered all this. So this is the Northrop Grumman gateway architecture, and it looks very similar to the NASA architecture. In fact, what I would say is this is the NASA architecture with some tweaks that we came up with. So our studies, we've got really multiple studies going on at this point. We've done NASA-funded Next Step 1, NASA-funded Next Step 2. We've done a PPE, power and propulsion element study, NASA-funded, and we've done our own IR&D studies. So the combination of all this leads us to this gateway. For the time being, NASA also has independent teams doing architecture studies as well as industry. And we're not the only part of industry doing this. Boeing, Lockheed, Sierra Nevada, Bigelow, et cetera, multiple people doing industry-led studies. And I think in the near future, you're going to see industry and NASA join together to a single reference gateway and really move through the details. So again, I would consider this really NASA's basic architecture with some small differences. What might be some of those small differences? For example, this vehicle or most of the modules are compatible with both SLS, but in some cases they could be compatible with expendable launch vehicles and self-deliver to the gateway. And that's been in the NASA architecture as well. Things like habitats probably want to go on SLS for sure, and we would agree with that. But possibly the logistics is better served by putting it on an expendable launch vehicle, and then after translunar injection, it's got to self-deliver itself the rest of the way. Because to get into this cislunar orbit, you have to do quite a bit of delta V in the vicinity of the moon. So it's not good enough just to buy a bigger launch vehicle. You have to build features into the modules such they can self-deliver. We also, from a risk perspective, we like to have a slightly more distributed power system. So in our architecture study, we've added some solar arrays above and beyond the primary solar arrays, which is in the power and propulsion element. So let's just kind of walk through what are the major elements there. Again, this matches up very, very closely to the NASA architecture. So first element, start from left to right, and it's also the delivery order as well. So the first element would be the power and propulsion element, and it would be launched by a commercial launch vehicle. Then you have the Esprit, which we believe will be built in Europe, and it would be delivered together with the next module, the science utilization module, which we've added some extra functionality to. But it would be delivered by SLS. Then you get into logistics vehicle, domestic habitat, international habitat, and the Orion. And the final piece would be we have cargo capability that can either use the SLS, which is the bottom right Orion cargo pod, or it can self-deliver on an expendable launch vehicle, and that would be augmentation module dash logistics. We try and change the nomenclature a lot just to keep people confused, and at various times we've used other nomenclature as well. So my takeaway is that, Cislunar Gateway is definitely the next step for NASA, for the country. We support it 100%. We also support getting very quickly right to the surface. So we think that both elements should be done in parallel. We also really, as I've said, believe that Cygnus can be a first step in that process. In fact, if you wanted something with a lot of habitable volume and you wanted to get it out there first, I really think this design could be the first element out there from a schedule point of view. It's in serial production right now, and having something that has a manufacturing line already established and is going is really a huge advantage. Of course, Cislunar space is a different animal than low Earth orbit, but we understand the differences. We understand things like the differences in thermal. We understand the navigation is going to be different because you can't see GPS in Cislunar. We understand the comm is different. There's other things. We spent the last couple of years with NASA looking at all those differences. So we think it's a good product, and from our perspective, we kind of see this roadmap that starts at low Earth orbit with the products you've seen and moves out to Cislunar. So to best highlight that, I've also got a video, which I'm going to play, and that is not really new material, but to me, it's really helpful to see like the assembly sequence, and I really think you're going to like it. And we'll have this on our YouTube site, the Northrop Grumman YouTube site, in another couple of days, if anybody's interested in it. So if you could play the video, we'd appreciate it. Getting the just a minute signal. So we're going to start with today. So it's somewhat duplicative of what we've already gone through, but you know, I'm a hardware guy, so it's always good to see it, even if it's more time. This is our Antares vehicle, because this particular part is LEO. So the Antares vehicle delivering the Cygnus to low Earth orbit. It then phases to the space station. Here's the area where you can see the camera on the robotic arm is going and grabbing the Cygnus from behind. It's berthed, you open the hatch, and there's the cargo inside, the cargo comes out. This is a little bit different mission than the OE9. And when things are done, it goes its own way and ultimately goes to safe destruction. Now we're into Gateway Cislunar. And after, the assumption is the PPE has already been up there, launched commercially, and this is the first SLS launch with the co-manifested capability. So you're going to see that in action, bringing the Esprit module, which is today's manifest. I must say, part of what we try and do with robustness is the schedule on this program is going to move around a lot, and having flexibility is super, super important. So any of the designs that we've worked on, we try and think what ifs on, you know, one module shows up earlier than another module, or, you know, something like that. So flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. So for example, in some scenarios, the international module would go before the US module. We can, from our architecture, we can handle it either way. This is the US module, habitation module going up first. Once again, the Orion does the work around Cislunar to take the module and bring it all the way to Gateway, and then is involved in the docking. Done a lot of work with NASA on interoperability standards, interface standards. I think that's going to be key to the future. So in our vision, the NRHO, near rectilinear halo orbit, is ideal for controlling rovers from the Gateway. It's a very elliptical orbit, so if you put the apogee over your point of interest, like for example the lunar South Pole, you get long dwell times over that point. It's just orbital mechanics. So this would be a good place to control rovers on the South Pole, for example. But we don't think we should stop with just rovers, although that is an important set of measurements, in situ measurements for science. But we think that next step is humans to the moon. my perspective, it can't happen soon enough. This is really something we need to do as a country, and Northrop Grumman would like to be one of the many companies that are going to be required to make this happen. So I think we've got time for maybe one or two questions. I think we have some people with microphones around. Are there any questions? And I am aware that there's a cocktail party soon, so.
Hello, I'm Mark from Germany. Just a question about general stuff about Northrop Grumman Innovation Systems. Are you planning to have any crew vehicles in the future?
Our focus really is vehicles that can do logistics, cargo. Short answer is no, we're not working on that right now. So it's maybe a step in the future, but right now it seems like we have Orion and commercial crew. We've got lots for now, and I think the Cislunar Gateway really needs different design of modules, like what you've seen in this video and in the charts. We need habitats, we need logistics, we need science accommodations, utilization, that kind of stuff. So that's our first priority.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mara Romero from France. Do you think that we could need some kind of GPS for the lunar activity, and could your modules be a part of it?
So the question is, do we need some kind of GPS in cislunar space to help the vehicles? I think the answer would be yes, we'll definitely get there. There's different techniques that could be used, and Apollo showed that you could do it on occasional basis without the GPS, but it'll make everything much more operable and much more flexible. So I think we'll get there. It's on our roadmap of different ways that would facilitate the navigation. All right, I appreciate everyone's time, and thank you very much.